Aloha, it's Katie, and lucky for you, your girl was terrified of college interviews. So much to the point that she wrote down every single interview question for Stanford, Yale, UPenn, Harvard, Cornell, Columbia, and Princeton. On screen, I'll also pop up my decision result. Long story short, I got waitlisted at most of these schools. I still wanted to share my experience though because I think not a lot of people talk about the interview process. And if you're like me, you are super anxious or just want to be as prepared as you can for interviews. So I want to tell you all the questions I got. Just think of it like a question bank, and I really hope this will help you as you prep for your own interviews because I went into this with no idea what to expect. One quick thing before we start, I actually have an entire playlist called How to Get in Your Dream College where I talked about my best tips for the US application process, especially if you're looking to apply to very intense and selective schools. You'll find another video on the top 5 questions every university normally asks, as well as how to answer them, and also my stats, my essays, everything is there. So check it out by clicking the card on the right or checking out the description box below. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe. Okay, so for today's video, I'm going to talk about the first half of schools, and that's Stanford, Yale, and UPenn. My next video coming out next week will then be about Harvard, Cornell, Columbia, and Princeton. Let me pull up my notes where I wrote down everything. So I applied early action to Stanford. So this was the very first interview I had. I was so scared, you have no idea like how nervous I was. But my first interview was with an alum at my high school actually. So the first question he asked me was, what's going on at your school? Which honestly really threw me off because I expected it would just go right into, tell me about yourself or something. So I was like, what do you mean what's going on in my school? So you might find that your interviewer will be very casual in this sense. It really varies between schools, and my experience as an international student will likely also be different to yours. So just keep an open mind with what your interview might be like. Then he asked me, what are you involved in school? Out of all of this, what activity means the most to you? I think I talked about art and graphic design actually at that point. So his follow-up question was, what meaning does art give you and what drives you? So deep, right? Something I've noticed in my interviews is your interview questions will often take shape depending on what you say. In this case, I wanted to talk about art, so that's why I purposely mentioned how important art and design was to me at that point, and so that's why he took that hint and then started asking more about my interests. And keep in mind, the whole goal of an interview is really to just get to know you. So remember that you have the power to shape the conversation depending on what you say. After that, I think I had mentioned an iPhone case collection I had designed and sold. So he asked which piece was most meaningful to me and why. He also asked, how have you improved or made your club more known? Because I was the president of the visual arts club at my school. He also said, please detail how you worked your way up in a leadership position, because I had transitioned from the public relations officer to the vice president to the eventual president. He then asked, what did you do outside of school? Which was a great segue for me because then I started talking about my YouTube channel, which is like the thing I can talk about for ages, honestly, because it was so transformative. He asked me how my channel started, what motivates me to continue, and then he also asked, what intellectual thing do you do outside school? Which I laugh at this question, but I actually think I talked about coding, because the whole reason I got into computer science, which was my intended major for university, is because I was a huge Tumblr addict, like back when Tumblr was big. I used to code and design my webpage themes, so I think I talked about that because I think programming is intellectual. Then he asked, how's your academic life? What subject are you strongest in? What do you love about computer science? What was an obstacle you faced in high school and how did you overcome it? Please give an example of how did you overcome it. I think I talked about my oh my gosh, it sounds so like, by the way, sorry, I'm currently a third-year university student, so looking back at this is like, wow, my problems were different. Like, they were so valid, when I was still in high school, but I look back, my attitude has changed so much from this. So I think I talked about my struggle with grades and the expectations I had been put, and the expectations I was facing with my family, with school, and everyone, which really hurt my own learning because I started focusing so much on the results instead of actually my genuine curiosity and love for learning. And honestly, that attitude shift that I had made in my early high school changed so much. If you guys have watched me for a long time, thank you. You will also know that in middle school I got B's. It's chill, like I had different priorities in middle school, and it was really in high school that I turned things around and I managed to get straight A's and then end up as my class valedictorian. But it took me 4 years to get there, by the way. And then he followed up with asking, please give an example of how you acted differently in class with your change in mindset from grades to genuine learning. And lastly, he asked, you're a busy person, how's your social life? Which honestly, I don't even know what I said, but like growing up, I didn't even go out that much. Like simply put, I was like that good girl in high school. Just like very wholesome life. I didn't really do much. Like school was really my life because I was doing 2 varsity sports. I was, I think, the president of 3 clubs in my senior year, and I also had my YouTube and academics. So really the activities I did were my social life, and that wasn't a bad thing at all because the people I talked to a lot were people I had shared the same interests with, you know, with the visual arts club and sports. I also wrote down some tips for myself, which was like, number 1, to smile, 2, to make eye contact, have positive body language, and 3, lean forward and look interested and engage in the conversation. I know it might be a bit hard if you guys are doing online interviews or even calls, but if you get the chance to do it in person, then look engaged. Your interviewers are people at the end of the day. They chose to talk to you today, so make it a good experience for both of you. My 2 pro tips too before any interview you have for a school is also to prepare 2 things. Number 1, why you're choosing that school, because it is a very likely question that they will ask you why you think you are a good fit to that school and how you see yourself in that school, what you would join, why it interests you. And the second thing is to also bring questions about that school, because most interviews at the end will end with them opening up the interview to you, asking them about their experience at that school. So you can also get to know the school, because they know you're also applying to a bunch of other colleges, and you know, if you do get accepted, they want you to accept their offer. So they're also trying to sell the school to you. My second interview was with UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, and this one was actually very straightforward. First thing he asked me was, why Penn? Which also just like, oh my gosh, it's like the way these 2 interviews started was like so different, because the first one was like, how's your school? Like, what's up? You know, we're bros. And then the second one is like, why UPenn? I was like, okay, cool, yeah. He asked me, how did you get in computer science? And the dude was so intimidating because he was so accomplished. He actually studied computer science and he was like magna cum laude. So I was like, okay. He asked me what my favorite subject was, what my biggest accomplishment was in school, my biggest regret or setback, and we ended with talk about leadership, because I think I had mentioned a lot of the leadership positions I'd had. And again, in the bottom of the notes, I also just wrote down bullet points for why Penn. Last interview for this video is my interview with Yale. Now, this was the first interview I had that was on call. So to this day, I don't know what this guy looks like, but we'll get right into it. So this was the first one where he finally asked me for the first question, tell me about yourself. At that point, I had given him my pitch, which, by the way, you guys should definitely prepare an answer to what you're gonna say if people ask you, tell me about yourself. He then asked me, do you think design and YouTube are your main passions? And I wrote down that my response was actually like, no. I think it's more creativity, which is the overarching theme for me. He asked, do you see yourself continuing YouTube as a lifelong career? He asked, how have you used your platform to help others? Do you think personal conversations are the best way to reach them, or perhaps videos? And then he asked, how did you try to master your craft? How did I conduct my research for schools? He asked, did you research equally for all schools? In what other ways are you trying to help other people? I may have talked about an app I was building at that point for the lost and found system in my school. So he asked, do you have any other app ideas? Oh my gosh, and then he asked me a culture question. So now that I'm having like flashbacks right now. So at this point, there was this viral hashtag going on in the Philippines called #FindIka, because there was a girl who had gone missing, and so the whole internet was trying to find her. And so this actually raised a huge debate also, because I think they ended up finding the girl, but then they didn't update the public or announce that it had happened. So a lot of people were still worrying, and they were demanding explanations for what happened to her. And his question for me was, do you think they owe us as the public an explanation? Then he asked, how do you think Filipino culture and society are relevant to that? And finally, he asked me, do I have a dream school and what am I looking for? I'm pretty sure I said no, I didn't have a dream school, because you don't tell your regular decision school that your dream school wasn't them. Yeah. So that's it for today's video, but stay tuned next week and make sure to subscribe, because we are then going to talk about my Harvard, Cornell, Columbia, and Princeton interview, which you don't want to miss out on. And I also just wish you guys the best with your interviews. I know it can seem intimidating. My biggest advice for you is to chill. 3 years after this process, have like grown to love interviews. I mean, this is probably what everyone thought back then, because I talked to a camera. I obviously love talking. Realize I do like talking about myself. It doesn't sound good, but it's also like from a psychological perspective a very human certain things. Channel that part of you that is happy to be who you are, that is proud of your accomplishments. And I know, especially when you're talking to elders or adults, it feels like you need to act very professional and whatever. But honestly, that is my biggest regret, is that I feel like I was trying to be who they wanted me to be and I was just really stiff. I was like not my very, casual self. And I wish I could just tell myself that these interviewers, they know that we're children. Come on, we're like 17, 18 years old when we do these interviews. They're not expecting us to be like these prim and proper, like employee level mannerisms. We're just in high school. So give yourself that room to be yourself. And of course, also be polite, have the basic manners, but don't do it to the point that it constricts who you really are. If you guys have any questions, I try my best to reply to comments. And also I'm at AlohaKDX on Instagram if you want to DM me. I am also a bit backlogged, but I do try my best to reply to everyone. If you guys found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up, especially because next week's video is also going to be part 2 with 4 more interviews. Subscribe to my channel for more videos about college life because I do a lot of vlogs now that I'm in university. I just finished a virtual semester and I'm gonna head off back to in-person in the States, so I'm super excited. And that's all. Share this video with your friends if you found it helpful. And that's all. I will see you next week with another new video. Bye guys.